Africa. In my current role, I am responsible for developing policy strategies and advocating for favorable government policies, regulations, and standards to support Intel's business interest in Africa. I lead the policy and government affairs work in areas such as artificial intelligence, 5G, 6G, that is currently in the work, broadband, data governance, privacy and security, and other digital transformation policies. In addition, I lead engagements with universities, research institutions, startups, and
Welcome to Vodcast Collaborative with Deepak Bajan and Parveen Puram, where we dive into transformative journeys of leadership, innovation, and their impact. Today, we are honored to have Dr. Bienvenu Soglo, a visionary leader contributing in drafting policies for the connected world. He is the Director of Government Affairs at Intel Corporation Africa. Dr. Bienvenu's career span over 6 years at Intel, a chip maker, where he has led groundbreaking work in shaping the policies around 5G, broadband, AI, and digital transformation, which shows his commitment in uplifting Africa in the world of AI and beyond. Beyond policies, he fosters collaboration with universities, research institutes, and NGOs, driving projects at the intersection of policy and the technology. A multilingual professional with fluency in English, Chinese, and French, and he is a PhD holder from Tsinghua University. Dr. Bienvenu embodies global expertise and relentless commitment to the innovation. Today, discussion is themed at empowering innovation, transforming global policies, where he will provide a valuable insight into how technology and policy converge to create an impactful change. Welcome, Dr. Bienvenu.
Thank you very much for having me, Deepak.
It's a great honor for us as well. I know your busy schedule and you're traveling a lot. Thanks for taking the time for us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Bienvenu, your contribution is unmatched and the list is really, really long. But I would like to understand you as a person first.
Thank you very much, Deepak, for inviting me to the Value Seller Talk, episode 147. My name is Dr. Bienvenu AGBOKPONTO Soglo, born and raised in the Republic of Benin. I am currently the Director of Government Affairs Africa and a Principal Engineer at Intel Corporation based out of Johannesburg in South Africa. In my current role, I am responsible for developing policy strategies and advocating for favorable government policies, regulations, and standards to support Intel's business interest in Africa. I lead the policy and government affairs work in areas such as artificial intelligence, 5G, 6G, that is currently in the work, broadband, data governance, privacy and security, and other digital transformation policies. In addition, I lead engagements with universities, research institutions, startups, NGOs in the International Government Affairs Group within Intel for research focused on emerging technologies and projects or initiatives at the intersection of policy and technology. For example, I am currently leading a program seeking to foster innovation in Africa through deep tech, especially in AI. I have 20 years of experience working in the ICT, digital infrastructure and telecommunication industry with expertise in mobile telecommunication technologies, global and regional spectrum policy, deep tech, for example, AI, broadband strategy, data governance, corporate social responsibility, digital innovation, digital transformation, as well as governmental ICT policies. Before joining Intel Corporation in October 2018, I worked at I worked at Qualcomm for more than 10 years, first as a staff engineer, then as a government affairs director for West and Central Africa. And prior to that, I worked at Huawei Technologies as wireless product manager. I hold a PhD degree in control science and engineering from Beijing Tsinghua University, where I graduated in 2005. I have a Master of Science in Engineering, specialty in control theory and control engineering from Dalian University and Technology, where I graduated in 2002. And I have a Bachelor of Science in Automatic Control from Dalian Maritime University, where I graduated from in 1999. As you said earlier, I speak various languages, English, French, and Chinese.
So one thing which is very important, which I noticed, that the digital transformation, you are saying it very easily, very comfortably. And I understand the organizations, the operators, enterprises has a very hard time, when they talk about digital transformation. It looks like a very, heavy loading for them. But, the way you are explaining it and the using this term, I understand your expertise and your passion around it. So thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you.
Dr. Benu, I want to understand, what is your perspective on the role of technology in driving digital transformation, both from a global perspective as well as to the Africa?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. But let's say bringing in some context from the African perspective. Okay, with a population of around 1.5 billion, right, today, and this population is expected to reach 2.5 billion by 2050. And Africa has one of the world's largest youth population. And therefore, the continent has a unique potential to pioneer a new area of innovation, leveraging emerging technologies. I want to talk about, a strategy developed and published by the African Union, which I think, it is the continental organization that set, right, policy frameworks and strategy for the whole of the continent. And so in May 2020, the African Union published the Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa, 2020-2030, with the vision of, and I'm quoting here, the vision of an integrated and inclusive digital society and economy in Africa that improves the quality of life of Africa's citizens, strengthen the existing economic sector, enable its diversification and development, and ensure continental ownership, with Africa as a producer and not only a consumer in the global economy. So that I could. And in that digital transformation strategy for Africa, actually is based on various pillars. We have, the foundation pillar, where you have, talking about digital infrastructure, right, which is very important, digital skills and human capacity, digital innovation and entrepreneurship. But it also has critical sectors that they name in the strategy, such as the need for digital government, digital education, digital health, digital agriculture, to drive the digital transformation. Now, if I focus on the foundation pillar, for example, the digital infrastructure, broadband connectivity in particular, right? You will see that during the global pandemic, right, COVID-19 in the year 2020, that has accelerated the need for a swift and equitable digital transformation to address the digital divide, especially in Africa, right? And in Africa, currently, we are experiencing a lower broadband connectivity rate. I'll give some data point. In 2024, the percentage of individuals using the internet was around 38%, right? This is well below the world average of 68%. And this is according to the report published by the ITU, International Telecommunication Union, a report called Facts and Figures. That's what the report says. Furthermore, this report also shows that there is a wide internet usage gap between urban and rural areas, with 57% of individuals using the internet in urban areas, while 23% of individuals are using the internet in rural areas. And having said that, it's also worth noting that because when you look at the African continent, broadband connectivity actually comes through mobile, right? And therefore, we reference sometimes to talk about active mobile broadband subscription penetration. Here we say subscription, right? Subscription penetration is different from individual using mobile broadband. And here the data says, still the same data from the ITUD. It said that the active mobile broadband subscription penetration in Africa is 52%, right, in 2024, which is still lower than the world average of 95%. Now, it is worth, we say lower, but it's worth mentioning that there have been a lot of improvement over the past several years in terms of broadband connectivity in Africa. Because if I refer to the same report, ITUD Fact and Figures, published 2024, it indicates that the percentage of individuals using the internet in Africa has grown from 25% in 2019 to 38% in 2024, right? So that is a 52% increase in 5 years, right? So I think that's quite, some huge progress. Also, in terms of the socioeconomic impact of having broadband connectivity, it is worth noting that, economic studies done by the International Telecommunication Union, which was published in 2019, it made the finding that expanding mobile broadband penetration by 10% in Africa would yield an increase of 2.5% in GDP per capita, right? And therefore, a rapid digital transformation across Africa is key, right, to driving more equitable innovation and sustainable economic growth. There, I was talking about, right, broadband connectivity, right, especially as part of digital infrastructure. But it's also very important to talk about, AI, right, which is actually, the technology which is at the forefront since, from last year up until this year, and then for the years to come. And the Africa AI landscape has been evolving rapidly with a significant focus on AI, machine learning, and computer vision. And this together account for around 60% of deep tech startup on the continent. When we say deep tech, we talk about AI, machine learning, computer vision, data cloud, and edge, etc. Right? And so, and this data, how did we get it? This data is supported by an Intel study conducted in collaboration with AfriLab and Brighter Bridges to evaluate the African deep tech startup ecosystem. Right? And this highlights the continent, the region's commitment to technological innovation. So adding to that, according to a study published last year, a study done by Access Partnership and Google, and it's projected that AI application could support up to $136 billion worth of economic benefit for 4 countries. This is only four countries in Africa. So here I'm talking about, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa by 2030. So you can imagine if you look at the whole continent, so that's number it is, in the trillion US dollars. And therefore, I think that investing in digital infrastructure, digital skills and human capacity, digital innovation and entrepreneurship, enabling environment, policy and regulation, digital government, digital education, digital health, digital agriculture will continue to drive the digital transformation of the African continent. As we also emphasize, and this is important, you have to look at relevant content, right? You have to look at digital content and application. You need digital ID, right? If you want to foster, for example, e-government or e-services for government services, right? It is important to look at, increasing the adoption of emerging or deployment of emerging technologies, right? Such as 5G, Wi-Fi 6E, AI, infrastructure such as data centers and cloud. Other aspects, cybersecurity, privacy and personal data protection, and then research and development. All of this will unlock new growth opportunities to enable ICT innovation on the continent.
Wow. So a lot of things are happening in that part of the world. And obviously, you just touched about Africa. Now, if you look at the global perspective, the things are, we cannot count it right now. It's all about the estimations. Estimations.
Yeah, that's correct.
I would like to take one step, back, and anyone who sees Intel, it consider it as a chip company or a manufacturing company, obviously the world leader in the semiconductors, chips, and all this is the first impression. But what role Intel plays in policy making and its contribution specifically for the African continent. So we would like to understand it more now. From a layman.
Yeah, Sam, thank you very much for the question. Yes, I mean, as you know, Intel is an industry leader creating world-changing technology that enables global progress and enriches lives. Intel, I mean, inspired by Moore's law, right? We continuously work to advance the design and manufacturing of semiconductors to help address our customers' greatest challenges. And so by embedding intelligence in the cloud, right, in the network, edge, and every kind of computer devices, we unleash the potential of data to transform business and society for the better, right? And so now, from policy perspective, right, and here I'm talking globally, Intel works with governments, policymakers, and industries around the world to advocate policies that encourage new ideas, promote fair commerce, and protect resources. And so by promoting innovation and competition worldwide and advancing leading governance and corporate responsibility practices, Intel seeks to help people and businesses thrive in an increasingly global economy. Now, as Intel in Africa, because your question is about what we're doing in Africa and how we support policy here, as Intel in Africa, we utilize our technology, right, our global scale, and the deep understanding of the African market to support ICT innovation on the continent by helping to create African solutions to African challenges. So we have 4 key areas that we focus on the African continent, okay? And so the first area is to support African administration acting as trusted technology advisors in the digital transformation journey. Why can we do that? Because we are several layers removed from the end user, right, and the users. And so we work with companies that use our technologies that then actually, you know, made it available to the end customers. Second area, we work to expand digital readiness, engaging with government across the continent. The third area is to support Africa deep tech startup ecosystem, for example, in AI. And the fourth area is to engage African countries, regional economic communities. When I say regional economic communities, it's like, you know, ECOWAS, SADC, IACO, North Africa, South Africa, etc. The regional economic communities, continental organizations such as the African Union, for example, or the African Telecommunication Union, or Smart Africa, to contribute to the development of harmonized continental policy and regulatory frameworks. Now, specifically in terms of Intel contribution to policy making in Africa, Intel contributed to the development of harmonized policies as well as regional and national regulatory frameworks. For example, the AU Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa that I mentioned earlier, we actually, you know, provided some input. We contributed to that, to its development, both through participating in 2 workshops, one in Addis Ababa in December 2018, another one in, I believe, October, November 2019 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. So we contributed our bit to actually to the development and finalization of that strategy. The second example that I want to give is that we were active working group member, providing advice and input contribution to the development and finalization of the Smart Africa first edition of the Smart Broadband 2025. That was published in the year 2020. And here, of course, as I said earlier, you know, 10% increase in broadband penetration, you know, yield 2.5%, you know, increase in GDP per capita, right? And that Smart Broadband 2025, the objective was an increase of 50% of the broadband connection penetration from the base of 2019, which was 37% at that time. Okay, so that is the first example. Yeah. Second example, we also, you know, actively contributed to the development of the first edition of the AI for Africa blueprint, which was developed in Smart Africa, which was published in 2021. And the third example I wanted to give is that we supported the development of recommendation within the African Telecommunication Union, right? For example, we have the R2R recommendation on 5G or IMT 2020, Wi-Fi 6E, spectrum management, etc. And we do that via written input contributions to the various task groups that were put in place by the African Telecommunication Union. The fourth area is that we contributed and we continue to contribute, but we contributed to the development of African Common Position for the World Radio Communication Conference preparation towards, it's a global conference that took place in Dubai in 2023. So there we engage in the process starting in 2020 with the African Telecommunication Union, ECOWAS, EACO, and SADC. And we did that also in the previous cycle for the WRC 19, but I'm just giving the example of the recent one. We also submitted written representation, right, on 5G, Wi-Fi 6E policy formulation in various countries on the African continent. For example, South Africa, for example, Kenya, for example, Nigeria, Namibia, Zambia, just to give some few examples. It's not exhaustive. And sixth area, we also contributed to effort regarding the development of national AI strategies. For example, in Nigeria, for example, right, whereby we sent an inter-written representation to provide our knowledge and then our policy position to contribute to that effort, and also to the recently published draft for Kenya AI Strategy 2025-2030, right, where we send our comments to that. And finally, I wanted to mention that we also contributed as member of the National Advisory Council on Innovation, NACI, working group for the initiative. And the initiative is called Recommendation Towards the Development of a National Artificial Intelligence Strategy for South Africa. So that's kind of some of the example of policy effort on the continent.
I understand the list is too long and thanks for clarifying the back-end work which Intel is doing, other than the position, the global leader position which he has taken on the chip side. But it creates another question, that the continent with 50 plus, I think 54 countries in the African continent. So there will be a lot of challenges or the opportunities which you have seen, when you are drafting the policies or contributing to the world forms like ITUs and the others. So how you take care of each region, so that everyone's interest should be maintained and they should be served equally?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think true to your point. I mean, in terms of the number of countries, if you talk, according to the African Union, then they say 55 countries. In some other cycle, they talk about 54 countries. But anyway, I think we have more than 50 countries, and therefore that's why on the continent we're talking about working towards having a single digital market. So working towards having a single digital market means that it is important to work towards harmonization of policy frameworks, right? And I think that's where we have the effort from, let's say, the African Union, right, which is developing various strategies. So you have, the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy 2020-2030, which I talked about earlier. And also there have been various strategies that have been developed. Recently, we have the African Union AI strategy, right? That was also published in July last year. And so if I take the example of the, World Radio Communication work process, we are currently now in the WRC 27, right, preparation process. And so the engagement we have on the continent is to work with countries, regional organizations, and continental organizations such as the African Telecommunication Union to contribute towards the development of the common position, right? So if you work towards a common position, it means that, right, the continent is working towards having a harmonized position, which will be something very positive, not only for the continent, but working towards, harmonization at the global level, even though you cannot reach complete harmonization, but that works towards that. And the reason why that is important, I give the example, for example, of spectrum, for example, right? Let's say if you talk about 5G spectrum, right? The way the frequency arrangement, etc., defined in the RTU and then through 3GPP, etc. It is important to have those frequency arrangement harmonized in a way that will create provide opportunities for the companies to have economies of scale. And therefore, the equipment that they will manufacture, the cost will be lower rather than have to cater for various type of standards. And so that's I just give that as an example, just to project the way that we actually work with various countries and foster harmonization. We bring in our global know-how and then the understanding of the market as well, because it is important that when we bring in our global know-how, we also need to understand what is the need from the market, from the government, etc., what they want to achieve, so that we can work together towards that goal.
And definitely every country has their own challenges. Their infrastructure is not up to that stage where we could talk about the developing or developed countries like South Africa or Nigeria, as an example. So I think that keeps you and your team busy, I believe.
Yeah, very, very busy, very busy. But I think it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to contribute to those efforts, because those efforts actually really help to improve the life of people on the continent, contribute to the socioeconomic progress or benefit of countries on the continent and for the continent at large.
Definitely. Yeah. At the end of the day, the technology is for making the human life better.
Yes,
And smarter. Correct. Now and smarter. Nowadays, the predictions, everything.
Yeah.
Right. So, specifically, my next question focus on your intersection of policy and the technology, right? So your work is at the junction where this intersection of policy and technology happens. So how do you balance in such advancing innovation with the need of the responsible policies which has to be drafted at the right time?
Yeah, thank you very much. As you talk about the work that we engage in at the intersection of technology and policy, and thank you very much for the question. As I stated earlier when I was introducing myself, I did mention that I am currently leading a program seeking to foster innovation in Africa through deep tech, especially in AI. And so I'll give a specific example. So it was in the year 2021, I believe, and there you're having an internal discussion to see, how can we foster. Of course, we've already doing a lot of work in foster innovation on the continent, but we want to see how we can support the startup ecosystem on the African continent to provide more impact support. And so we then decided to say, okay, well, so first let's understand, right, what is the state of play, right? Because global companies like us, we have a lot of programs, right? There are a lot of programs, right, that we conduct, etc. But within the context of Africa, we said, okay, let's understand what is the state of play, and therefore, we conducted 2 studies. Okay, so the first study that we conducted was in collaboration with AfriLabs and Brighter Bridges to evaluate the African deep tech startup ecosystem. And then there, of course, we define deep tech clusters to help people to understand what you're looking at. So we have clusters such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computer vision, hardware and manufacturing, data cloud and edge, autonomous robotic, software development tools, next generation compute, and security and privacy. So that's what the 7 clusters that we define. And what we found that the top 3 deep tech clusters are artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computer vision, data cloud and edge, and autonomous robotics, with around 60% of the deep tech startup concentrated in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computer vision deep tech clusters, and therefore the 60% of data that I talked about earlier. But what we realized that out of the 245 at that time, in 2022, deep tech startups that we found, because here deep tech startup is different from startups at large where you have thousands and thousands on the continent. So out of the 245 deep tech startups that we identified, we found that none of them have a connection with universities or research institutions, which is a little bit in contrast with what we really see if you are in the US, if you are in Europe or even in China, the way the startups are created, right, from the universities, and then they from research, innovation, etc., and then they become startup. And therefore, that prompted us to conduct a second study. And this second study was conducted in collaboration with Wits University, that is in South Africa here, and then a hub called Simologon, and the Johannesburg Center for Software Engineering. And this is to evaluate the African deep tech spin-off ecosystem from the lab to the market. And by the way, these two reports are publicly available on the internet that people can download. Okay, so then here we also define 10 deep tech clusters, right? And what we did, we added 4 more deep tech clusters, and then we removed one from the 7, right, that we defined earlier in the first report. And so we removed next generation compute, which were part of the first one, and then we added another 4 additional deep tech clusters, and that includes new materials and nanotechnology, biotechnologies, hydrogen and fuel cells, and sensing. Within the context. So those are the 10 tech clusters. So what we found that the majority of the deep tech spin-offs identified, they employ biotechnology, 41.3% of the time, data cloud and edge technology, 17.4%, and then artificial intelligence, machine learning, and computer vision, 8.7%. So those are the data we got from the second report. But then when we put the 2 reports together, right, the key findings from the 2 reports, and then the gap that we see, we identify that there is a need to focus on 6 key areas. Okay, and those 6 key areas are as follows. The first one, we found that there's a need for digital deep tech skills training program, right? So offering technical assistance, specialized training, and enablement to deep tech startups, developers, hubs, accelerators, ecosystem support organization, VCs, venture capitalists, for example, in AI. So that is the first one. Second one, the need for access to R&D resources. And this is something that we heard when at the same time we were doing the study, we were conducting workshops. So we have workshops in Nigeria, also workshops in Kenya, where the startups and the accelerators, they were telling us what were the challenges that they were actually facing. Then we talk about, the need for access to R&D resources, for example, offering technology validation platform, right, access to cloud credit, etc. The third area is funding, right, to work with partners and international organizations to drive more PPP partnership grant funding for startup in deep tech, because not a lot of money actually comes into that, right? So the fourth area is government support. And that's the reason why I gave this example, because you see that there's a need for government support here. And the government support here is the need for government to engage startups to work on solving key government challenges, right? And then they need to enact policies that enable the development of frameworks for facilitating commercialization, R&D, and corporate investment in universities and research institutions. So the fifth one is the need for university and industry collaboration. For example, they need to have platform for initial R&D and creation of prototypes, need for fellowship program, right? Send students, from Africa to other countries to learn what they're doing, or other continent, etc., and then come back, etc. So a student exchange program. And the sixth one is, the go-to-market or market access. So some initiative to promote, right, spin-off creation, in addition to opportunities for stakeholders to come together, right, networking, etc. So focusing specifically on government support, because that is to talk about, the technology. So I give this example of the deep tech to talk about technology, and then what are the areas where intervention are needed. That include government support, and that's bringing to the second part. So talking specifically about the government support, what we advocating or what we suggesting, right? We're suggesting for government first for them to engage startups and spin-offs to work on solving key African government challenges.
Mm.
Because, I believe that, if you get a startup, a spin-off, the government, let's say you have the top 3 or top 5 of the challenges that you want to solve, and then you get them to go and work on it. I believe that, over a couple of months, etc., there will be something positive that will come out of that. And if in the end they really find a solution, then you get a company already that has its first customer, which is the government. I think so. That's something that, right, we kind of suggesting to government to really look at. The second area is to engage all stakeholders on the development of the national, let's say, deep tech policy framework or strategies. So when I say deep tech, so in terms of policy framework, so you have, for example, the AI policy. That's it. Need to develop that. You have a number of countries that are already doing that. 5G, right? Or digital economy policy, where you have all of this inside 5G, Wi-Fi 6, and broadband connectivity, for example. There's a need to have clear policy that is in place, and with, let's say, a spectrum roadmap and all of those things to give a clear, timeline, etc., for the private sector to know when they can come in and then how they can plan, right? Because that is very important. So the third one is also the need to enact policies that, as I talked about earlier, that facilitate the development of frameworks for commercialization, research and development, corporate investment, encourage university research, etc. And the fourth one is to enact policy that enable access to grant funding that are needed for research and development for deep tech startups. So I give that example to make it a little bit more concrete, in essence, on how we look at technological development and what could be the support needed or policies that government needs to put in place.
Oh, thanks for bringing it, because in India also we have a lot of startup shift programs, incubators. Obviously the government support, they fund it with a little grants so that they can start, at least they can make their product as MVP product, minimal viable product, which can be, obviously, funded by the private companies to scale it up. And the go-to-market approach is really important. But one thing, the question which comes in my mind is, let's take a example of one of a small town in Namibia. I'm not going to Sierra Leone or some other place right now, but let's go to that particular Namibia small town or tier 3 city. So I understand that the youth, which you mentioned, they are, great innovators nowadays, right? They want to create a job rather than being a job, right? Where the entrepreneur into. So how such policies, or do you find this a challenge in reaching the policies and the frameworks you are making to reach to that level, to that household, where this youth is sitting?
Well, I think, it's you talk about Namibia, and then it's also true for other countries on the continent. And then, in fact, we engage with the regulator there in Namibia that is very progressive, and they develop their strategies, etc. And I would say, when a government, a country put in place a strategy or a policy, is for the whole country, right? It's for the whole country, whether it is in urban areas or in rural areas, etc. So it is for everyone. And I would say that innovation, as understand, is at the forefront of all the African government, especially the youth. How to create jobs, right? Employment of the youth. So a lot of the government, all the policies, all what they're trying actually is to see how they can actually provide opportunities for the youth. For the youth to either get a job or self-employed, and therefore having the startup, etc. That's coming. That is something that it is very well encouraged. And so I think, as I said earlier, I think it is both ways, right? Government put in place policy frameworks, at least to set the pace or the vision, etc. Right? But at the same time, also, the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, etc., they also need to engage, right, with government as well, to see where they can work together. I believe that is really an area that is very critical, where they can work together, meaning, in my view, how can they help government to solve the pressing challenges? Because I see that as very important, because if you help the government to solve the challenges, then, I mean, because you're helping them to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So I believe that if you solve it, then obviously, right, you become, they'll become your customer. And not only them, but you have other customers as well. So I think that collaboration is very key, identifying what are the key focus areas, key challenges that they should be working on.
Right. Thanks for bringing it up, because that generally leads to a lot of that's another challenge which comes in the execution phase. But yes, I think the adoption is creating and helping everyone to reach to that level, because everyone has the right to being connected and being contribute for the society betterment.
Yeah.
Now we are talking specifically on these emerging technologies, and when I say emerging, I should not say 5G, because 5G is already in place, right? So, but if I look at 5G and broadband, which is very critical for Africa's digital future, and whatever the different pillars you mentioned about, whether it's digital health, transformation, education, are part of that whole the bigger umbrella. So, what challenges and opportunities you have encountered while you were drafting and shaping your policies?
Yeah, great question. And I think, we all saw it, and then I talked about it earlier, that the global pandemic, it has accelerated, right, the need for swift and equitable worldwide digital transformation to address the digital divide that we see, in developing countries, and then, especially on the African continent. And achieving this demand, a particular focus on critical geographies like Africa, it is important, right? Because the broadband or internet penetration that we have, as I said earlier, is roughly around 38% on the continent, which is below the world average of 68%. And we've also seen, the data point in terms of the internet connectivity or an internet penetration gap between rural areas and urban areas, right? On the African continent, 57% of individuals using the internet in urban areas, while 23% of the individuals are using the internet in rural areas. And so on top of that, there is a recent report published, it was in October 2024. It was published by the GSMA, and the title is "The State of the Mobile Internet Connectivity." And this is focused on Sub-Saharan Africa, right? The report. And the report shows that 87% of the population in Sub-Saharan Africa live within the footprint of mobile broadband network, but only 27% are connected or using the internet. So this number shows that there is a 60% usage gap for one reason or the other in Sub-Saharan Africa. So in terms of some of the challenges, I mean, what causes that, right? I like to refer to, the 2013 Annual Broadband Commission report. It was published already in 2013, right? And it says that, some of the barriers that developing countries, so of course, including African countries, they face, you have the challenge of lack of infrastructure or high cost of deployment. You have the challenge of limitation in amount of spectrum available, even though now that area, more or less, I think, it has improved a lot. The third one, you talk about high tax rates on telecom services or equipment. Third one. Fourth one, it talks about administrative delays in authorization to deploy new infrastructure, right? If you talk, they need to have right-of-ways, etc., right? The other challenge is the lack of basic commodities. You need electricity, right? Yeah. Water, etc. The other challenge, and I talk about usage gap there, is that there is limited availability of relevant local content. Right, because for me to use the internet, then I mean the content that I'm having should be relevant, right? You can see the voice. Almost everybody is using voice because that is useful. Because which other content is there that people in the rural areas or in the urban areas they will want to use that is really relevant for them, right? I think that's a challenge, still a challenge actually today. We also have, as part of the challenge, the low level of ICT skills, right, of some of the population, right, how to use, the devices, etc. And one last challenge I want to mention is the limited availability of consumer electronic equipment, right, or accessibility issue, right, in terms of consumer electronic equipment. Having said all of those, and looking at the broadband connectivity gap, there was also another report published by the World Bank, right? And that says for Africa to reach universal access to broadband by 2030. This report, it's published in 2020, 2021, and it talks about the period between 2021 and 2030, right? The report indicated that there's a need to invest around 100 billion US dollars, right? For to reach universal access to broadband. And those investments need to be done in areas such as infrastructure, right? We talk about, right, digital infrastructure gap, network operation and maintenance, ICT skills content, right, and policy and regulation. So now coming specifically now to talk about 5G, right? Yeah. And broadband connectivity, for example, Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi 6E, they play a critical role, right, in enabling meaningful connectivity. And so deploying them also has socioeconomic benefit because it's both ways. Because the question will come, okay, why do we need to deploy 5G? Why do we need to deploy Wi-Fi, etc.? Right? So both it's useful for the population, but that's should have some socioeconomic benefits so that you actually go to do that, and then you see the reason why you're doing that. So there was a report published by the Wi-Fi Alliance study in 2021 that says that opening the lower part of the 6 gigahertz band, that is talking about 5925 to 6425 megahertz for Wi-Fi, that will boost a combined socioeconomic benefit from around 79 billion US dollars in 2021 to grow to 130 billion US dollars in 2025. This year, that is only in 10 African countries. All right. And then they had some specific, numbers for South Africa, for Nigeria, for Kenya, etc. All right. And having talked about Wi-Fi, now coming to 5G, right? The GSMA also published a report on 5G in Africa. And the report is titled, Realizing the Potential, right, of 5G on the continent. It was published in 2022. And the report says that 5G could benefit the African economy by 26 billion between 2021 and 2030. And the sector that will benefit the most you have retail, manufacturing, and agriculture. Those three sectors are expected to be the sector that will benefit the most from 5G. Okay. So now, before I come to, some of the policy recommendations that we actually suggest to African administration, African countries, it's worth understanding a little bit what is 5G, right? Just for the listeners to get a little bit understanding. So the 5th generation wireless technologies, which is referred as 5G, it represents more than just, right, another step, right, just moving from 4G to 5G, right? It is the convergence of wireless with computing and the cloud, so the two. So 5G is a new paradigm which enables everything to be smart, right? Because everything is connected and everything will be connected. And 5G is supporting billions of connected devices, of course, with different requirements, and expand flexibility and agility beyond the purpose-built, let's say, LTE or 4G networks. And 5G addresses existing, emerging, and future uses, because there are some new use cases that are actually coming, right? But specifically, it has 3 usage scenarios that we usually refer to, right? Enhanced mobile broadband, right? With peak data rate up to 20 gigabits per second. And we also have the second user scenario is Internet of Things or massive machine-type communication. And here we're talking about having 1 million devices per square kilometers. And then the third user scenario is ultra reliable and low latency, right? With latency lower than 1 millisecond and then very high reliability, 10 to the power minus 6. And a combination of those will give us various types, right, of use cases from virtual reality, augmented reality, smart cities, sensors, et cetera, et cetera. And so the fact that 5G, right, enables diverse use cases, and those use cases, each of them, they have different requirements, right? For example, in terms of spectrum, right? The requirement for one particular use case, if it is a use case related to enhanced mobile broadband, will be different from a use case, for example, ultra reliable and low latency, for example, in terms of spectrum, right? And therefore, what we recommend in terms of policies, right, for African administration is that first, it is important to review and modernize existing regulations to adapt to new technology development, such as 5G. You can use regulation that you use for 2G and 3G, right, to use it for 5G. That's right. That's not going to work, right? So that's need to be modernized. The second area where we advocate for them is say, okay, well, it is important to develop a harmonized 5G spectrum roadmap. And when you're developing that roadmap, it's important to look at both licensed spectrum, right? Licensed spectrum in low band, mid band, and high band, but also to look at licensed exempt spectrum as well, because at some use cases you require license exempt to be able to take advantage of, let's say, 5G that uses licensed spectrum. And the third area, it is important to create an enabling environment for the development of infrastructure, right, that facilitate 5G and broadband, such as you need the fibers, you need the data centers, you need the edge compute, right? That's need to be in place, right? And then the fourth area, we say, well, okay, you have to look at relevant use cases and applications. Because one thing is to have the technology, the other thing you have to see, okay, which use cases, right, you really want to put in place, right? Such as fixed wireless broadband, which we see now that is actually more used in terms of 5G use case, not only in Africa, but in other parts of the world. Digital government, right? Education, what are the use cases? Healthcare, agriculture, smart cities, and, industrial IoT. So it is important to look at that. And the fifth area is that, well, you need to look at other aspects. I was talking about the challenges earlier, it is important to streamline the right-of-way and permit process, right? Where I talk about administrative challenges. So that is important. It is important to adopt technology neutrality, right? Which allows, telecom operators, when they have spectrum that they're using for 4G, then they can refarm that spectrum, right, to be able to deploy 5G. It is important to look at privacy data protection. Very important, because you have to protect your personal data, etc. You also need to look at cybersecurity considerations. So all of those are important to enable and facilitate the deployment of 5G, Wi-Fi 6E, and broadband connectivity in general. Now, the challenge that I face, because one thing is like, okay, you advocate, and you're talking about policy with policymakers, etc. So the challenge I face at the beginning when 5G deployment started, right, 2019, 2020. So the question from African decision makers is like, okay, they want to understand, they say, okay, well, our countries just actually started, they have just deployed 4G. Yeah. Right. And then they're just providing services. And then now you come in and then you talk to us about 5G. Right. So can you help explain, right? The reason why you actually doing that? Of course, from our perspective, it's from advocacy up until the time that policy frameworks, etc., are put in place. It takes some years. It takes some time. So you can wait up until the time that the deployment need to happen for the policies to be in place. Policies need to be in place before actually the deployment takes place. So the time has to be, these things has to be done in advance. The other challenge is the 5G business case. and relevant use cases on the continent. And what we've seen is that fixed wireless broadband appears to be the most relevant use cases that are currently used and deployed. We also have other use cases in mining, etc. That are coming online on the African continent.
Yeah, no, yeah, the list is too long. Definitely, when you go for use case, country by country specific. But one thing which is very important, and most of the people would look into that, is when you are bringing billions of sensors connected together, right? Can be, maybe industrial IoT, it can be a, traffic signal, it can be a education, whatever the sensors are there. Even now the people are talking about the wearable sensors also to track your body measurements, right? So the security and privacy plays a very important role. And most companies, most of the individuals are actually moving away because they think that their data is not secure, right? How you tackle those perceptions, and how do you tackle them in the while drafting your policy?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And then you, as I said just now when I was talking about policy advocacy for 5G and broadband connectivity, that privacy and security is very important, right? And privacy and security are critical components, right, of ensuring that digital innovation is sustainable and trusted, especially as technology continues to evolve, right, and reshape industries across the globe, including, of course, in Africa. So advocacy for privacy and security is necessary to protect individuals, organizations, and societies from the risk that come, right, with increased digitalization, right? And so I'll touch upon, a few points. So the first one is important to build trust with users, right? Because digital innovation thrives on trust. And when individuals and businesses, they feel confident that their personal data is protected, they are more likely to adopt new technologies, right? Use digital services and share information online. So advocacy for privacy, such as ensuring clear data protection policies and transparency practices, help build that trust. And security measures like encryption, multi-factor authentication, right, and secure payment system make sure that data breaches or cyber attack, they do not undermine that trust. So that first aspect. The second aspect is important to protect personal data, right? Because as innovation expands, so does, of course, the collection of personal data, right? So, for example, you look at digital platforms, you look at the apps, right, and various services, they collect vast amount of data, right? And sometimes those data, if misused, they can harm, right, users and also undermine the goals of innovation. So privacy advocacy push for regulations, for example. I mean, if you want to give the example of Europe, where they have the GDPR, right, General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, and we have similar frameworks that have been, developed and enacted on the African continent, right, by various governments where they have established either data protection authorities or they have established data protection commission to ensure that personal data is handled securely and transparently, right? So secure data storage and controlled data access will prevent leaks and unauthorized use. And so I'll touch upon the various other other points in the interest of time. So the third aspect is important to encourage safe adoption of emerging technologies. The fourth area is important to avoid economic and reputation damage, right? Because a single security breach can have serious financial and reputational consequences for both, whether it's a startup or whether it is an established company. And therefore, advocacy for privacy and security helps companies stay ahead, right, of emerging threats to build resilient system and avoid the costs associated with data breaches. So the fifth area is about regulatory compliance and legal frameworks, right? And here, government and international bodies, they are increasingly recognizing, right, the need to protect users' digital rights, right? And so privacy and security advocacy helps shape the legal and regulatory landscape in a way that promotes innovation while at the same time safeguarding public interest. For example, regulation like the GDPR provide a framework for compliance, right? While companies must adhere to, and this is in order to stay in business. The sixth area is important to encourage ethical use of data, right? Seven area is important to mitigate cybersecurity risk, right? Eight area, capacity building, advancing digital literacy. That is very important, right? Because part of the advocacy of privacy and security is to ensure that individuals, they have the knowledge and the tools to protect themselves, because it's right from that. And so promoting digital literacy programs can help users understand the risk of digital interaction, from phishing scams to data sharing, and that will equip them with the skills to safeguard their privacy. And this will reduce the likelihood of users unknowingly contributing to security vulnerabilities, fostering a more secure and informed digital society. So in summary, privacy and security advocacy helps to ensure that digital innovation progresses in a way that respects individual rights, builds trust, and fosters long-term success. And so strong privacy protection and robust security measures are essential for creating a safe digital environment where innovation can flourish, but also for safeguarding the personal and financial well-being of individuals. Without a solid focus on privacy and security, digital innovation risks being undermined, right, by misuse, abuse, right, and there will be trust deficit.
Yeah. No, thanks for bringing it up, because this is an important parameter. And digital literacy, if the person is educated, what to click and what not to click, what to allow, what
Yeah.
not to allow, that is helping him to make him secure and, most importantly, trustworthy. So,
yes.
And the trust means the more interaction, and that's where the economic will grow. In interest of time, I would like to ask a last question. And what advice would you like to give to the startups who are actually started their journey and who are new to this corporate world, business world?
Well, I think that's that's a really great question. I think I did mention a little bit earlier, about how the government, right, and then startup, they actually, should work together, right? And so for me, it should be to encourage startups to work on African government top challenges, to innovate and create solutions that can be used by all. I mean, that's first aspect. The second area for African government is to encourage African government administration to engage startups and spin-offs to work on solving key government challenges for socioeconomic development. I think that is, in my view, I mean, having been in this sector for the past close to 20 years now, I believe that having that as a starting point in terms of what the ecosystem at large needs to do, and government is a big customer, right? Whether it's in Africa or everywhere you go, they're a big customer. And so as a startup, if at the beginning you look at, okay, what are the top 3, top 5 government challenges, what they really want to solve, you engage with them to understand, right, what they're looking for. That will go a long way. And then, of course, encouraging government to, to have an open door policy, encourage, right, the ecosystem, especially the startup, to engage with them. I understand a lot of government on the African continent, they're actually doing that. That will actually help in not only innovating, but also in providing, or developing the policy frameworks that are actually required to enable, right, those engagement, to enable those innovations. So that would be my advice.
No, that's perfectly, a great insight, specifically from this part, because you rightly mentioned government is their first customer, and obviously when government is looking for the thing, they need they himself, tell the people to develop it in scale, which can solve a one problem and, which will impact millions. So,
Yes, exactly.
right. And definitely, once they start, they took their, couple of steps, then it will be easier for them, for any VC to associate with them and to, move along with their journey.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Bienvenu, for sharing your valuable time, insights, and experiences with us. I understand your busy schedule, but your work exemplifies how this innovation and policies can come together to transform societies and create a lasting impact. Any last message which you want to share with the global audience and how they are able to connect with you as well?
Yeah, thank you again, Deepak, for inviting me to the Value Seller Talks for this 147 episode. It was a great pleasure for me to share my insights into how technology and policy converge to create impactful change, especially on the African continent. And I look forward to further engaging with the audience. And they can reach me via my LinkedIn. I think, as I said at the beginning, like LinkedIn, they can reach me out, via my LinkedIn, and then we can continue the conversation.
Your expertise and your insights are very much required for the companies, for the individuals, because those who are working in the close hood, they should know what they are doing, and what is their impact, which is they are going to create in the world. Definitely. So I will be tagging you in the video which we are going to post it, and obviously the people can connect with you. Thank you. So
thank you so much.
Until the next time, this is Deepak Bajaj signing off. Thank you so much, Dr. Beno.